Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
How do you get to heaven? Do I really have to read the Bible? How do I pray? Did Jesus really walk on water? That's a doozy.
The podcast where kids can get answers to their big questions about faith. Here's your host, Pastor Eric.
We live in God's big and beautiful world that is filled with wonder. And sometimes that wonder also brings up lots of questions. And this podcast is all about asking those questions. I'm Pastor Eric, and I'm here with a very special guest, Kai. Can you say hello?
Hello.
All right. Kai, before we get going with some questions, I have 2 questions for you. All right. If you could hang out with anybody in the world, who would you want to hang out with for one day?
My best friend for a week.
Your best friend? Who's your best friend?
Tucker.
Tucker sounds like a pretty cool friend. Okay, well, you'd hang out with Tucker. Okay, if you could ask Tucker any question, what question would you ask Tucker?
What is your favorite ice cream?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, now that makes me wonder, what is your favorite ice cream, Kai?
Vanilla.
Vanilla. Okay. Do you put anything on your ice cream?
Yeah.
I had a feeling. Like what?
Whipped cream and sprinkles.
Whipped cream and sprinkles. That sounds good. All right. Well, Kai, I believe you've got some questions that you brought with you that you would like to ask. Do you have a couple questions?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, why don't you ask your first question?
What is heaven?
What is heaven? Okay, that's a really good question. And that's a big question. I'm curious, what do you think heaven is?
It's a place where God lives.
Okay, yeah, it's a place where God lives. That's a pretty good answer, Kai. And that's kind of what I would say. Heaven is a place where God dwells, where he lives, where he is. But here's an interesting thing. Did you know that in the Bible, whenever heaven is mentioned, it actually, sometimes it refers to different things other than just the place where God lives? Did you know that sometimes when you're reading the Bible and it says the word heavens, it can be talking about the sky, like where birds fly? Did you know that?
No.
Yeah. Jesus was talking to his disciples one time and he was saying, look at the birds of the sky. Or he said, look at the birds of the heavens. And he was referring to just the sky, like when you look up into the sky. What are some things that you often see when you look into the sky?
Clouds.
Clouds. Yep. Because we live in Seattle. Lots of clouds. Well, the Bible also talks about another thing when it says, when you look into the heavens. In Psalms, David talks about how the heavens declare how great God is. And meaning, he says, when you look up into the sky and even past the sky, you can see all the great things that God made. Now, when you look past the clouds, what's out there? What do you see past the clouds?
Blue sky.
Blue sky. And what if you're looking out there at night? What do you see?
Stars.
Stars. And the stars are where?
In the sky.
In the sky. Are they in space?
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about going to space? Yeah. Do you want to go to space? I think it'd be pretty fun. Well, in the Bible, when it talks about the heavens, sometimes it's actually talking about like space. The stars, the sun, the moon, the planets, and it's saying that God made all of it. But then there are other times in the Bible when it talks about the heavens, and it's exactly what you talked about, what you said, that the heavens are kind of like the place where God lives, where he dwells. And in Psalm 11, it talks about how God's throne is in heaven. Do you know what a throne is, Kai?
Yeah.
You do. What's a throne?
It's the type of chair that kings sit in.
Yeah, like where the king sits, where the king dwells, that's where a throne is. And God's throne is in heaven. But here's one interesting thing that can kind of like blow your mind. All right. Are you ready for that? You ready for this? Heaven is not really a physical place, but it's a spiritual place. Now, does that make sense? Or is that kind of confusing?
Not that confusing.
It's not that confusing, right? Like physical means all the things that we can see, maybe things that you can hear, smell, touch, right? Those are all the things that you can get that are physical. But heaven is in a spiritual place because God is spirit, right? And so heaven in the Bible, a lot of times when they talk about it, they talk about how heaven is, I always say like up there, up in the sky. But the truth of the matter is, we actually don't know where heaven is. We just know that it's where God is. Does that make sense? Yeah. Cool. Do you have any other questions about that?
No.
No? Okay. Well, whenever I talk about heaven, I usually get like 20 more questions in my mind, but we'll save those for another day. All right. Kai, do you have another question for me?
Yes.
All right, let's hear it.
What is evil?
What is evil? Ooh, okay. That's a good question. Can I ask you again? What do you think evil is?
It's where Satan lives.
Interesting. Where Satan lives? Okay. Well, Satan is certainly evil, isn't he? Yeah, in the Bible, we can read about all the things that he's done that are bad and harmful and cruel and selfish. The Bible tells us in John chapter 8 that Satan, he's a liar. He's like the king of lies, right? So Satan is definitely evil, but I think that when we talk about evil, we're not necessarily talking about where Satan lives, but we're talking about something else. And in the Bible, we know that the Bible kind of explains evil as when God's good creation is broken or used in bad ways or in selfish ways. So evil is kind of like when something is bad or harmful or broken from the way that God intended it. Now, I have a question for you, Kai. Do you know what story is told in the very beginning of the Bible in Genesis chapter 1? Any thoughts?
When the earth was made.
Yes, that's exactly it. Genesis tells us when God created everything. Now, when God created the heavens and the earth, do you remember what he said after the sixth day after he made Adam and Eve, what he said about creation? You remember what he said?
Don't eat from the certain tree.
That is true. He did tell them not to eat of the fruit of the tree, but before he told them that, he had said that his creation was very good. He kind of gave it like 2 thumbs up, 5 stars, okay? His creation was perfect. It was just the way that it needed to be. Well, evil entered into the world when somebody came slithering in. Do you know who came slithering in and tempted Adam and Eve?
A snake.
A snake. And do you know who that snake was?
Satan.
Yeah, it was Satan. And he tempted Adam and Eve and told them to disobey God. And he said that they could have knowledge of everything. But Adam and Eve wanted that knowledge for a selfish reason. And so from that point on, there was sin and evil in the world. And it was when it took what God made that was good, and then it broke it, and they used it for selfish gain. So evil is when people do things or say things or think things that are bad or harmful, or when God's creation is broken and used for bad things. And it's when God's rules or desires are broken. What he wants, when he wants good things for us, when we choose to do the opposite and we rebel or we ignore him, that's evil. That's what it is. So that's a really good question. That's a big question. Do you have any other thoughts or questions about evil?
Mm-mm.
No? Or at least not yet, right? Okay. All right. Do you have another question for me?
Yes.
All right, say it nice and loud. Let's hear it.
Why is God so mighty?
Why is God so mighty? Why do you think God is so mighty? What do you think?
I don't know.
I guess that's why you're asking the question. What are some things that you have seen or heard that tell us that God is so mighty and so powerful?
The Bible.
Okay, what has the Bible said about God's being mighty? Can you think of any?
He can control storms.
Oh, yes, he can control storms. What story does God control a storm in? Do you remember when Jesus was on a boat? Remember that story? Jesus is on a boat with his disciples, and all of a sudden there's a big storm, and the waves were really big, and the disciples were freaking out. Would you be a little scared if you were on a little boat and there was big waves around you? I know I'd be terrified. And the disciples were freaking out, and they woke him up because Jesus was taking a nap during the storm. Do you think you could sleep during like a thunderstorm or a lightning, when there's lightning outside and thunder? Would you be able to sleep?
Yeah.
Okay. You're lucky. You're fortunate. I would be wide awake. Well, Jesus was taking a nap on the boat during a big storm when all of a sudden the disciples are like shaking him. Jesus, wake up, wake up. There's a storm. And he gets up and he tells the water and the storm to stop. And it does, which is to your point. Jesus, God, is so powerful he can control storms. So I guess the question is why? Well, let's go back to Genesis chapter 1. We were just talking about it, right? What does that story tell us about in the Bible?
That God is perfect.
Well, God is perfect. And what did he do in the very beginning?
He made the world exactly how he wanted it to be.
And do you know what God made the universe out of? Do you think he used Play-Doh? Do you think maybe he used a couple big steel beams? He must have used lumber. No, he didn't. He spoke the universe into existence from nothing. Doesn't that make your head almost want to like explode? It's like thinking about how did he do that? And I don't have a very good answer for that one. But God created the universe on his own with his words. And so the whole universe, all of creation was made by him and it's for him. Yeah. And Colossians 1:16 and in Psalm chapter 19, it tells us that God created the universe. And because he created it, he made all the rules, all the laws. He made gravity. Do you know what gravity is?
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever experienced gravity? Like falling off of a swing set or the playground? Yeah, sometimes gravity is not good, but usually gravity is good because it keeps us down on the ground and it keeps us from floating off into space, right? Well, God created the law of gravity and everything else in the universe. And because he created everything, he has power over everything. And that's pretty cool. All right, I'm going to teach you a really fancy word that refers to God being so mighty. Are you ready? Let me know if you've heard this word. Have you heard of the word omnipotence? No? You should say it. Say omnipotence.
Omnipotence.
It's kind of a fun word, isn't it? You know what that means?
Mm-mm.
It means all powerful. And God is omnipotent. Although whenever I say that word, I like to say like omnipotent, like really strong, like a muscle man. Was that weird? Okay, that was weird. Well, God is omnipotent, meaning he's all powerful. And there is nothing that is nearly as powerful and as strong as God. And that can actually make us feel pretty safe. Because the Bible, Jesus also tells us that God is our Father and he's a good Father who he's like looking out for us and he's always there. And he wants to be with us and he's able to keep us safe and he's always able to be with us. And so God is omnipotent. So you'll have to remember that word and share it with your brother and teach it to him. Can you do that? Okay. All right. Well, those were some great questions, Kai. Do you have any other questions about God being so mighty? No? Okay. Well, if that's all that you have, I think that's all we have time for today. But I'm sure in the days, weeks, months, years ahead, you'll have more questions. And maybe we can do this again and we can ask some other doozies of a question. Sound good? All right. Can you say bye to everybody?
Bye.
Bye.
That's a doozy. Thanks for listening. Do you have a question you want to ask? You can tell us at purposely.com. Just click on voicemail. Don't forget to leave a review or tell your friends about this podcast so they can listen too. See you next time.
Thanks for listening. We just wanted to take a minute to let you know that just like you and your family, Purposely is also part of a family, the Krista Family of Ministries. Krista helps kids and teens learn and grow in their faith at King Schools and Miracle Ranch Camp. And Krista shares Jesus with people in the poorest, most remote places through World Concern. Krista Senior Living is a community of love and care, and Krista Media is a place of hope on the radio. God is changing lives through these 5 ministries, and Krista is on mission to share the good news of Jesus. To learn more, visit Krista.org.